Look closely at the sides of the canyons near the water. You see a huge white line, like a ghostly ring around a shrinking bathtub. That line shows where the water in Lake Mead used to be. This reservoir, created by the Hoover Dam, was once the biggest man-made lake in America. It was built to guarantee a future of water and power for the desert Southwest. For decades, it was a guarantee. But now, that promise is failing. The water level has fallen by over 170 feet since the year 2000. That's taller than many skyscrapers in the region. This isn't a small change. It's a historic decline caused by a megadrought that has lasted for over 2 decades. This isn't just a local problem for Nevada and Arizona. Lake Mead is the crucial water savings account for the entire western U.S. If this giant tank runs dry, the results will not just be sad pictures of cracked mud. They will be a shockwave of disaster that hits our cities, our lights, and even the food we buy at the supermarket. The question is no longer if Lake Mead will hit a crisis point, but what happens to millions of Americans when the water finally runs out? The taps will stop, 25 million people at risk. The first and most direct crisis affects drinking water. About 25 million people rely on this one shrinking lake for their water every day. This includes huge population centers like Las Vegas, the Phoenix area in Arizona, and parts of Southern California. Dams need a certain amount of water pressure to push water out to the cities. When the water level gets too low, it reaches the minimum operating level. Below this point, it becomes very hard to draw water from the reservoir at all. The real doomsday scenario is called dead pool. This is when the water is so low, around 895 feet above sea level, that it can no longer flow past the dam. It simply stops. If that happens, cities downstream like Phoenix and Los Angeles lose their main source of supply instantly, while some cities, like Las Vegas, have built emergency intake pipes deep into the lake. Their security is temporary. A failure of this scale means that millions of people living in these modern desert hubs would face immediate and long-term water shortages. Simply put, the American dream in the desert becomes impossible. The power grid loses a giant. The second huge problem is energy. The Hoover Dam is famous for making vast amounts of clean, cheap hydroelectric power. This power lights up homes and businesses across Nevada, Arizona, and California. But to make electricity, the dam needs the heavy pressure of the water behind it to spin its massive turbines. As the lake level drops, the pressure lessens, and the amount of power the dam can create shrinks dramatically. If the lake hits the minimum power pool level, the turbines will stop working completely. The Hoover Dam will be silenced. Losing this power means the regional electric grid loses a massive, dependable source of energy. To replace it, power companies have to rely on other, more expensive methods, often using natural gas or other fossil fuels. The result is higher electricity bills for millions of families and businesses, putting a huge strain on household budgets. It also destabilizes the entire power network, risking rolling blackouts across the entire Southwest. The water crisis quickly becomes an energy crisis when desert farms can't feed the nation. The third crisis affects every American, no matter where they live. Food. While cities use a lot of water, farming uses the most, about 80% of the Colorado River's water. Massive farms in Arizona and California depend entirely on Lake Mead's water, delivered through huge canals. These farms grow most of the country's winter vegetables, like lettuce, broccoli, carrots, and a huge amount of feed crops like alfalfa and hay, which support the nation's dairy and beef industries. When the government is forced to make deep water cuts, and they are, the farmers are the first to lose a major chunk of their supply. Forced water cuts mean farmers must stop growing crops on huge stretches of land. A drop in food production from this region sends a shockwave through the national supply chain. It means less food in grocery stores, and for the food that is available, prices will soar because the supply is so low. What happens at Lake Mead will directly increase the cost of your groceries. The hard truth: a new permanent dry climate. This isn't just a bad few years of dry weather. Experts call this situation aridification, a permanent, drier climate in the West, caused by climate change. Less snow in the Rocky Mountains feeds the river, and hotter air makes the water evaporate faster. The crisis at Lake Mead forces America to face a hard truth. The system was built on a flawed understanding of how much water the river actually had. We have been spending more than our account held for decades. The future means painful choices: less farming in the desert, massive investments in recycling and desalination, and a completely different lifestyle for residents in the Southwest. The slow emptying of Lake Mead is a powerful, visible symbol. It shows that the age of unlimited growth and endless resources in the desert is over. How should the U.S. prioritize the remaining water, for food or for cities? The final choice: food or fountains? The final crisis is one of choice. The shrinking water supply demands an immediate answer to a brutal question: who gets the last drops? Should the priority be protecting the drinking water for millions of city residents, or should it be preserving the agricultural water that feeds the entire nation?